Your Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, Blackhawks fans? Welcome on into another game day preview edition of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcasting network, where we bring you your team every day. On today's episode, I'll preview the Blackhawks' final matchup of 2025 against Matthew Schaefer and the Islanders. Then I'll get into the latest injury updates on Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar, plus whether we should expect Bedard to be part of Team Canada's roster that gets announced tomorrow. And then for segment 3, I'll break down big Monday performances from Anton, Frondell, and AJ Spellacy at the World Junior Championship. But first, just a quick reminder to please go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram if you haven't done so already. It's the latest account that I'm really trying to boost up and grow. I post clips of every Blackhawks goal that gets scored and share a ton of updates on all of the top prospects in the system, plus much more. So please make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram for me if you could. All right. Happy game day, Blackhawks fans. As I mentioned off the jump, it's the final game of 2025 for the Blackhawks here tonight at the United Center when they face off with Matthew Schaefer, the first overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft, in the New York Islanders for the first of 2 meetings here this season. The game is scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Central Time, per usual, when at the UC, and will be broadcast on CHSN. And I don't know about all of you out there, but I'm pretty jazzed up to see what Matthew Schaefer has in store for us here this evening. I mean, the kid's been truly unbelievable as an 18-year-old, not even as an 18, a young 18-year-old. Kid just turned 18 back on September 5th, right before the start of training camp. And is already playing like a true top pairing defenseman as a young 18-year-old in his first NHL campaign. He's recorded 24 points, 9 goals, and 15 assists in his first 39 NHL contests, while averaging 23 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice. I mean, unbelievable stuff for Matthew Schaefer. Only 4 defensemen in the league have more goals than he does. He's also 25th among all defensemen in time on ice, and obviously has been a huge help to what the Islanders have accomplished so far, as we're getting towards the midway point, as they have 46 points in 39 games coming into this matchup. That currently has them slotted in second place in the Metropolitan Division, and they're also the 4th best team currently in the entire Eastern Conference. So, yeah, definitely been one of the biggest surprises in the league so far this year, and Matthew Schaefer has been at the helm of that. Very stoked to see him in action for the first time in his NHL career tonight at the UC. As far as what the Islanders have been up to here recently, they're 1-1-0 in 2 games coming out of the Christmas break. Like the Blackhawks, they had a back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday, came out with a 2-0 victory over the New York Rangers in the front end of the back-to-back before falling 4-2 in Columbus on the back end on Sunday, in which, by the way, Matthew Schaefer was pretty blatantly tripped by Mason Marchment in that game. Marchment pretty clearly stuck out his leg as Schaefer was buzzing through the neutral zone, about to enter the offensive zone with some speed. And Matt Barzal, obviously a veteran leader for the Islanders, one of the guys who's been there for a while, took some exception to that play by Marchment, immediately raced over to him once the whistle blew and gave him legitimately a Paul Bunyan whack right across the skates. A little surprised that Matthew Schaefer, I guess I shouldn't say surprised, considering it's George Peros who's leading these decisions for the NHL Department of Player Safety, but I still was a little bit surprised that Matthew Schaefer didn't wind up with a suspension, was only fined a maximum $5,000 allowed by the CBA. Wasn't sure if he was going to be making the trip with the Islanders here to Chicago for this game, but he is going to do so, despite, giving Marchment a pretty clear slash that gave him a 5-minute misconduct, a major penalty, as well as a game misconduct. But Matt Barzal seems like he's going to be playing for the Islanders here tonight. But did want to point that out real quick, as that's what occurred the last time the Islanders were on the ice. And what also I wanted to bring up about the Islanders too is I'm pretty impressed with the way that they've been able to overcome some injury adversity to go and have the start that they've gotten off to so far this season, as they're currently down their number 1 goaltender, Ilya Sorokin. Semyon Varlamov, who was probably going to be in contention for their backup spot going into the year, he's currently out right now as well. That leaves the team with David Rittich, who I honestly haven't looked at David Riddich's numbers up until this point on the season, but has been really good as the backup for the Islanders and now has been thrown into the number one role with Ilya Sorokin out. And Marcus Hogberg is currently as their backup. So despite being down Sorokin, I know he's played for most of the season, but pretty impressive what the Islanders have been able to do. They also lost Kyle Palmieri early in the year to an ACL injury. Alexander Romanov, I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember off the top of my head if he's out for the season or if it's just going to be an extended absence for him, but was the recipient of a dirty hit from Dallas Stars forward Mikko Rantanen a couple of months ago. He's going to be out for a long time. So really impressive that the Islanders have been able to be the fourth best team in the Eastern Conference, despite having some pretty key injuries to some significant pieces of their lineup. But as far as the Blackhawks lineup for tonight's game, I'm obviously recording this prior to the morning skate here today. However, the Blackhawks held practice yesterday at Fifth Third Arena. In today's morning skate, the team announced is going to be an optional one. So probably doubt that we're going to see the true line combinations and defensive pairings for the contest at the morning skate. But we got a pretty good indication of what that's going to be based on yesterday's practice. And even though the Blackhawks offense did score 7 goals, technically 6 because the shootout goal doesn't count on Saturday against Dallas, but it was still one of their better, stretch of 2 games offensively since Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar have gotten injured. But I still agree that the forward lines, there's still a little bit left to be desired there. But now that Nick Foligno, the captain, has returned from his hand injury, as well as Ilya Mikheyev was back with the team for practice yesterday following a brief paternity leave as his wife gave birth to their first child, a daughter, recently. Again, congratulations go out to Mikheyev and his family. But with Mikheyev being back, with Foligno returning from his injury, that has allowed head coach Jeff Blashill, I think, to get back to some more like standard type of line combinations, which that's definitely been needed. I give credit to Landon Slaggert for looking pretty sharp in his first 2 games since getting called back up, but can't have him on the top line for too long and expect good things to happen. Can't have Jason Dickinson as your first line or even second line center for a long-term stretch and expect good things to happen. So nice to see kind of a more standard set of 4 forward lines that the Blackhawks rolled with at practice yesterday, including a couple of kids getting a boost up that I've been calling for on the show these last couple of weeks. But first, the top line that the Blackhawks rolled with yesterday, Andre Burakovsky and Ryan Green reunited on the top line. They were obviously the two that was playing along with Bedard for a significant stretch prior to him getting injured. They're now back with one another, and Tyler Bertuzzi has been put up on that left wing spot. And I do understand going with Burakovsky and Bertuzzi with just the way the Blackhawks need offensive support, right? Burakovsky is one of the few players with speed and skill to actually go and make something happen in the offensive zone. Bertuzzi's had a very active last couple of games. I think putting those guys back together makes a lot of sense, and putting Ryan Green as their center, given the chemistry that he's been able to establish with Andre Burakovsky this season, makes a lot of sense as well. Then as the second line, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about here on today's show, if you've been tuning in to Locked On Blackhawks over these last couple of weeks, then you know I've been begging for Nick Lardis to get a true top 6 opportunity, which honestly to me, it really hasn't made sense that he's been down on the 3rd and 4th line playing like 11 to 12 minutes a game when the Hawks are dying to get more goals. And I mean, yes, it's been in the AHL. Yes, it's been in the OHL, but he's also a rookie. So I don't know how you can expect, Nick Lardis to get that feeling of playing where he's supposed to be playing and playing in a role that he's been playing these last couple of years when you're playing him down on the 3rd or 4th line. I don't think that was really a wise decision by Jeff Blashill. I can understand it for a couple of games, but for him to be buried there for, basically 6 games in a row after a pretty active NHL debut back on December 13th against the Detroit Red Wings really didn't make sense to me, but very happy to see Nick Lardis finally getting his first look in a top 6 spot here tonight against the Islanders, should the Blackhawks roll out the same forward lines that they did at practice yesterday, which I expect them to do. And with Nick Lardis up on the second line was none other than Oliver Moore, who Blashill has had play with one another for the most part since Lardis has been up with the NHL team these last couple of weeks. I think that makes a lot of sense, keeping them together. And I think it also makes a lot of sense putting them with a veteran and a playmaker, a very smart player, although he's frustrated me very much so at times this season, in Teuvo Teravainen, and splitting up that full kid line. I just think having three rookies on the same line, they had a pretty good third period. Blashill also kind of jumbled up the line combinations in the final frame against the Pittsburgh Penguins, but both Lardis and Moore, I thought, finished really strong in that game, and apparently that was, enough for Blashill to be convinced that they deserve a little bit of a bigger opportunity here, which I believe that they do. I've talked about how, Moore hasn't gotten the finished product very often so far in his rookie season. Still, with the way that he can skate and with the way that he can make things happen and create in the offensive zone, he's just one of the few players on the roster that at least possess that type of upside. So I think giving him more of an offensive situation, even if the production maybe hasn't been what we want it to be, especially over the last couple of weeks. Moore has just one assist in his last 11 games and has only recorded more than 2 shots on goal once during that stretch. The Blackhawks need more out of him offensively, but I also still think this is the perfect time to give him that opportunity, to give him that runway and see what he has. And I also think it's a pretty wise decision to give Oliver Moore his first look down the middle here this season. He's mostly been played on the wing since signing his entry-level deal with the Blackhawks last spring. And I do think long-term, just considering the center depth that the Blackhawks have, who knows what's going to happen in a few years down the road, but I think it is more likely that Oliver Moore is going to be a winger for this team. However, he played center for the most part during his 2 years of college hockey at the University of Minnesota. Also played center a lot for the United States Development Program before getting drafted by the Blackhawks. So he's got lots of experience down the middle. He obviously has the speed to be a very effective two-way player, and that speed can allow him to do some good things defensively as a center. Offensively, could also give him some more ice and play with the puck on his stick a little bit more frequently. So I'm excited to see what Oliver Moore has in store at the center ice position, along with Nick Lardis, who's getting his first true top 6 opportunity, which I think is well overdue here for multiple reasons for the Blackhawks. Then on the third line with Oliver Moore getting a look down the middle, that's bumped Ryan Donato back to the wing and has allowed Blashill to go back to that shutdown defensive trio of Donato, Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev, which I've talked about on the show as well. I think that trio makes a lot more sense than Teravainen, Dickinson, Mikheyev does. I just think Donato is the more rugged player and is a little bit more physical, set up to have some better success defensively, and also is a shoot-first type of guy, which is needed when you're on a line with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev, who don't do a ton offensively. So I like that change, putting Donato back on the third line, and that leaves Nick Foligno, Colton Dach, and Landon Slaggert as the fourth line here tonight for the Blackhawks. Colton Dach also getting an opportunity to show what he can do down the middle. Don't think that's going to be a long-term position for him, but obviously with the Hawks, without Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar, their options are a little bit thin right now, and I do expect Nick Foligno, who's above 50% at the faceoff dot this year, to probably step in and help Dach out at the draw every now and then. And that leaves Sam Lafferty as the lone extra forward. Dominic Toninato, by the way, Blackhawks fans, did get assigned to Rockford yesterday, had 1 assist in 5 games during his brief first NHL stint with the Blackhawks. But now that Foligno has returned from injury, now that Mikheyev is back from his paternity leave, didn't really make sense to have Toninato utilized as the 14th forward, a second extra on the NHL roster. Plus, with Ryan Green, obviously he hasn't been in the AHL so far this season, but with Green, Moore, Lardis, Slaggert, all now up in the NHL, the Ice Hogs could use a little bit of support in their forward group, and Toninato should, help that cause a little bit. And then defensively for the Blackhawks, Alex Vlasic, Louis Crevier as the top pairing. Didn't think they had their best stuff against the Penguins on Sunday, but really liked what they did on Saturday against the Stars. And in general, I thought Vlasic has been better here over these last couple of weeks. The second pairing on Sunday against the Penguins, for the first time in a little bit, Blashill reunited the pairings of Wyatt Kaiser and Artie Levshinov, along with Matt Grzelcyk and Connor Murphy. I do feel like with the way that Kaiser has been playing recently and has 4 goals in his last 12 games now, I believe, leads all Blackhawks defensemen in goals. I think it is smart to pair him back up with Artie Levshinov, who I feel like that's who Levshinov has the best chemistry with of any Blackhawks defenseman right now. And it's been a little bit of a struggle for Artie these last couple of weeks, especially on the defensive side of things. So I think reuniting those two and giving the Blackhawks some offensive firepower on the back end with Kaiser and Levshinov makes a lot of sense. And that, reunites Matt Grzelcyk and Connor Murphy as a more standard, I think, third pairing for the Blackhawks to round things out. Ethan Del Mastro looking like he's going to be a healthy scratch once again. I'm actually going to try and ask Jeff Blashill about this after tonight's game, because I feel like, if Del Mastro was up with the NHL team, you probably want to get him into a game every now and then. Not exactly sure if that means, Levshinov has to come out for a game, or even if you sit Matt Grzelcyk, who I know has been good after signing a PTO with the Blackhawks in training camp and wound up earning a contract. But even if you have to sit Grzelcyk for one game to get EDM an opportunity, that's not the end of the world, right? Grzelcyk doesn't have long-term ties to this organization. So very curious to see if Ethan Del Mastro will draw back into the Blackhawks lineup in one of these next coming games. And then in goal for the Hawks, I'm guessing it's going to be Spencer Knight. I think Blashill is going to give him an opportunity to bounce back because, those starts, the one that he had on Pittsburgh, that's been few and far between so far this year. Can really only think of a game against the Winnipeg Jets where maybe he got beat a couple of 2 times too many with a few softies. Those are the only real 2 games that come to mind when I think about poor performances from Spencer Knight this year. So expecting him to return to the net for the Blackhawks' final game of 2025. Knight is now 10-11-5 on the season with a 2.65 goals against and 910 save percentage in 26 starts. Numbers took a little bit of a dip after, giving up 4 goals on the opening 7 shots of the game against Pittsburgh. However, against the Islanders in his career, he's been really good. So feels like it's a good situation to allow him to bounce back. He's 3-0-0 with a 2.67 goals against and 909 save percentage in 3 career games against the New York Islanders. All right, that is going to take care of my preview of the final game of 2025 for the Blackhawks here tonight against Matthew Schaefer and the Islanders. Coming up in just a moment, I'll get into the latest news on Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar, and we'll also discuss if we should expect Bedard to get snubbed by Team Canada tomorrow when the rosters get announced. But first, I do got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is Game Time. Hockey season, it's officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets, that can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is go and cheer on your team. But that's where Game Time comes in, the app that now gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So go and take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets right now with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and then use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase with Game Time. As always, before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder to please go smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks if you haven't done so already. 100% free. It will not cost you anything and really does help me out in a big way. I have a goal of 3,000 subscribers before 2025 comes to a close. Unfortunately, don't feel like I'm going to hit that, but hey, not too far off. Would greatly appreciate all the support, though, Blackhawks fans, in helping me grow my platform. Segment 2 here on today's episode, though, it was an eventful practice for the Blackhawks yesterday, not only with Ilya Mikheyev returning and some new line combinations in the forward group, but we also got a very promising sign for Connor Bedard's potential return. I know Bedard is set to be reevaluated in 2025, and that is still the case, but he was surprisingly spotted skating on his own prior to Blackhawks practice kicking off yesterday, and that's the first time we've seen Bedard skating since he suffered that shoulder injury back on December 12th against the St. Louis Blues. He's believed to have a separated shoulder, according to NHL insider Kevin Weeks, and the plan, Blashill said after practice, is still for Bedard to get reevaluated following the new year. Nothing has really changed on the timeline front. Didn't really have an update of that sorts. And I should also point out that Bedard has been instructed not to shoot pucks just yet. He was just kind of out there stick handling a little bit, skating around. But even, if he's not able to shoot pucks yet, it's definitely a promising sign that he was able to, go and throw on the gear and begin at least prepping for his return. As far as when that return may be, Blackhawks fans, still, of course, not officially sure. I still think he's a couple of weeks away, considering that he's not shooting just yet. And also, of course, didn't join his teammates for when practice started. He exited the ice, was only skating by himself, no contact involved whatsoever. But you can't help but feel like this is a positive that Bedard was at least able to go out on the ice prior to the new year and get some skating in, right? So hopefully it's just a matter of time, matter of getting a little bit more healthy. And in a couple of weeks' time, I'm guessing, probably around 2 weeks. I was thinking about this yesterday, going through my phone, looking at the Blackhawks schedule. I'll actually go and pull it up right now because I forget which game off the top of my head I was thinking about. And I hate to put, like a strict deadline on it or anything, or put an official timeline on it. But I feel like the 12th, January 12th, against the Edmonton Oilers, which is 13 days from right now. And obviously it could be a little longer than that. They want him to be 110% healthy. They do not want to rush Connor Bedard back with him being such a critical piece of what the Blackhawks are doing. But I do feel like, maybe after that set of back-to-back games on the 9th and the 10th against the Washington Capitals and the Nashville Predators, maybe the 12th against the Edmonton Oilers on home ice. That would be a fun one for him to return to, right? I mean, going up against Connor McDavid at the UC. Unbelievable watching Connor McDavid in person, by the way. I think he's one of the few players in the NHL who are truly worth the price of admission, regardless of what the ticket prices are asking. I feel like the 12th against Edmonton, maybe their next game, the 15th against the Calgary Flames, the 17th against the Boston Bruins, that home stretch, I feel like that's probably the ballpark for when we can expect Connor Bedard to return. Again, didn't get official update from Jeff Blashill. I'm just kind of educatedly guessing here right now, but great to see that Bedard was on the ice for ahead of practice yesterday. First time that he's been on the ice since suffering that injury 18 days ago now. We also got a little bit of an update on Frankie Nazar's status when Blashill was talking to the media after practice as well. Again, nothing like super substantial here, but did get a little bit of insight in terms of what Frankie Nazar could be dealing with, which isn't all that surprising. As Blashill said that he is now graduated to eating solid food here once again. And with him saying that, I think it's fairly obvious. Neither the Hawks nor Blashill have officially confirmed what the injury is for Frankie Nazar, just like neither Blashill nor the Blackhawks did that for Connor Bedard. It was Connor who went on 32 Thoughts and said he's dealing with a shoulder thing, and then it was Kevin Weeks who announced he has a separated shoulder. So the Blackhawks and Blashill like to kind of stay hush-hush with these injuries, which I completely understand. You're allowed to do that in the NHL, and why give out that information to other teams to potentially let them target, a certain part of a player's body or whatever it may be. However, after hearing that comment from Jeff Blashill, I do think it's pretty clear that Frankie Nazar is dealing with a broken jaw or at least a fractured jaw, considering he wasn't able to eat solid food over the last week or so up until these past few days. And it's just something that's unfortunately going to take time to heal. No real update on Frankie Nazar's status other than that was given around a month timeline to be out of the Blackhawks lineup. And he got hurt back on December 20th against the Ottawa Senators to close out that 3-game Canadian road trip. A month from then, January 20th, the Blackhawks have a home game on the 19th against the Winnipeg Jets, then don't play until the 22nd and 23rd, a back-to-back against the Carolina Hurricanes and the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'd say, maybe around those games or the game on the 25th at home against the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. I think those are potential return opportunities for Nazar. However, feels like between he and Bedard, he's the one of the two that's probably going to be out for a little bit longer since he got hurt 8 days after Bedard did. So it's going to be a little bit more up in the air, I feel like, for Frankie Nazar. Still kind of up in the air for both of these guys, but did get a little bit of insight and kind of an update on both of them from Jeff Blashill speaking on Nazar after practice, and Connor Bedard being on the ice ahead of the Blackhawks practicing, which, yes, they did do yesterday, even though they had a back-to-back out of the holiday break over the weekend. They just haven't had a lot of time to practice here over the last week or two, and, with the way things have been going in December, this team needs all the help that they can get practice-wise right now. Before I move on into segment 3, I do want to get into just a real quick discussion about whether us Blackhawks fans should expect Connor Bedard to be announced as part of Team Canada's Olympic roster that is set to be released tomorrow on New Year's Eve. We did get a TSN final projection of the Canadiens roster just yesterday. I saw that it was thrown around all over social media. Of course, what TSN projects does not mean this is the official roster for Canada by any means, but I did want to go through at least their forward group to kind of get a mindset of what people are thinking on the outside looking in right now for Canada's Olympic roster. And TSN did not have Connor Bedard on the team as their top line. They had Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, and Mark Scheifele, interestingly enough. I do think Scheifele is definitely one of those bubble guys. On the second line, they have Macklin Celebrini, Connor McDavid, and Sam Reinhart. I know Macklin Celebrini has kind of been considered a bubble guy. I don't know how they keep Macklin Celebrini off this team. Quite honestly, kind of like I would have before, if Connor Bedard had not suffered the injury, I kind of would have thought the same thing. I do believe ultimately Macklin would have held the edge over Connor just because with Canada obviously having a luxury of riches with talent, they have a lot of great offensive players. Just with Macklin, while Connor, yes, has made strides defensively so far in his third NHL campaign, Macklin Celebrini is still the bigger of the two players and the one who's probably set up to have a little bit more success defensively and also maybe with the physical side of the game, considering we could be getting some smaller ice for the Olympics this time around. So Celebrini, he's got to be on that Canadian team. I mean, it would be an absolute travesty if they leave Macklin Celebrini at home. Connor McDavid, he's going to be there. Sam Reinhart, we know he's going to be there. Brandon Hagel absolutely deserves to be there. Part of the Four Nations roster. Also plays for John Cooper with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Mitch Marner, we know he's going to be there for Team Canada. Nick Suzuki is who TSN had centering the third line. Do not think he's, a guarantee by any means. However, is having a really strong season, and with his two-way play and abilities to play on the penalty kill, I do think that versatility could be intriguing to Canada a little bit further down in the lineup. And then on the fourth line, TSN projects Brad Marchand to be in that left wing spot. I think he's a lock to be there. Bo Horvat is who they have in that fourth line center spot, a guy the Blackhawks are going to see here tonight. He's a leading goal scorer and point getter for the Islanders so far this year, so it is off to a great start to the season. Not convinced that Bo Horvat is going to be officially part of that team, though. Tom Wilson is who TSN had on the fourth line right wing spot. I think with the smaller ice, I think to match the United States intensity, Canada absolutely has to have Tom Wilson on that team. And that's something I've been kind of saying on the show. If you've been tuning in for a long time and are a regular listener, then you probably remember me saying that in the summer, that Tom Wilson, I think he's got to be part of this team so far. And then the two extras for Canada, according to TSN's projections, Braden Point and Sam Bennett. And I think both of those guys, even though it's been a little bit of a quiet regular season for Bennett, we know Sam Bennett isn't a regular season type of guy. He's meant for big type of moments. The Conn Smythe Trophy winner from last year. No way they leave Sam Bennett out of Canada's forward group, right? The notable omissions from TSN's projection here, obviously Connor Bedard, along with Seth Jarvis, who played at the Four Nations Faceoff. Mark Stone was part of Canada's team at the Four Nations Faceoff. So was Anthony Cirelli. Robert Thomas did not play for them at the Four Nations, but also someone who's been widely considered to be in the mix for Canada's forward group as well. To me, of this forward group, Blackhawks fans, I would say Mark Scheifele and Bo Horvat, I think, have to be the two biggest question marks. And I think Anthony Cirelli is absolutely going to be there. A guy who is great defensively, also plays for John Cooper with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not that that should make the determination, but could be a little bit weird, right? Could make the relationship a little bit odd if Cirelli, a guy who I think deserves to be there, gets left off the roster for someone like Bo Horvat or Mark Scheifele. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think out of those four or five notable omissions that I just went through, I do think Anthony Cirelli is the one with the best chance of making this team. Altogether, though, Blackhawks fans, to tie a bow on this, well, it feels like most, NHL content creators, insiders, people who work for like major networks, NHL Network, Sportsnet, feels like all of us are on the same page, right? That Connor Bedard has played well enough to be on this team. But unfortunately, I'm expecting him to get snubbed tomorrow, Blackhawks fans. And let me know in the comment section if you feel the same way. Just given kind of some of the recent rumors. And as I talked about, well, it feels like, yes, Bedard is going to be healthy by the time the Olympics kick off. I just wonder if that injury is enough for Team Canada to kind of leave him behind. And historically, they like to lean towards experienced veterans. I've mentioned this on the show time and time again. And while it's not Bedard's fault that he doesn't have that, he still doesn't have that. And if it comes down to he and Macklin Celebrini, unfortunately, it feels like Celebrini has the edge for the reasons I talked about earlier. The way that Macklin has kept the San Jose Sharks in the playoff position, the same way I would have expected Connor Bedard to keep the Blackhawks in a playoff position if he were healthy. But unfortunately, he's not. And I just feel like that's going to be enough for Team Canada to leave him off tomorrow afternoon when the roster gets announced. Let me know in the comment section if you feel the same way, Blackhawks fans. Would love to be wrong. Would love to see Connor Bedard be Olympic bound. But I think it's just hard to expect that to be the case with the way the news is kind of talking about it right now. All right, there is the latest on Team Canada's roster that is going to be unveiled tomorrow on New Year's Eve. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, still have to get into the latest from the World Junior Championship. Segment 3, time to get into another quick update out of the 2026 World Junior Championship. And what a Monday it was for a pair of Blackhawks prospects to help keep their respective countries undefeated. First, Anton Frondell and Team Sweden took care of business. They opened up the slate yesterday and got off to, I don't know what I'm saying. They opened up the slate yesterday. That hiccup really threw me off. First game of the day at noon against Team Germany, and Frondell had another big-time game like he did in the World Juniors opener against Slovakia. Kicked off the scoring with a one-timer on the power play in the first period. Another absolute howitzer from Anton Frondell over at the right dot. And then he did it once again later on in the game to give Sweden a 6-1 advantage, I believe, either 5-1 or 6-1, but a 2-goal game for Frondell. The second one, the one-timer came into a yawning cage, but the first one was an absolute bullet, short side, past the German netminder. And I know I'm not the only Blackhawks fan who's salivating watching Anton Frondell rip those one-tees from the right dot, thinking about his shot paired up along with Connor Bedard's shot. I mean, potentially on the top line with one another, depending on how the team wants to utilize Frondell. On the power play, Bedsy at the left dot clapping one tees, Frondell at the right dot clapping one tees. Maybe you have Frankie Nazar in the bumper roll. Maybe you have Roman Kanserov in the bumper roll, who had a 4-point game yesterday in the KHL. I'll be getting into another update on Roman here soon. But boy, oh boy, Anton Frondell can absolutely fire the biscuit. And as I mentioned in my article for Chicago Hockey Now going into the World Junior Championship, might be the best shooter of the puck of any player in this tournament as an 18-year-old. Of course, he'll still be eligible to play in the World Juniors this time next year. But it was a 2-goal game for Anton Frondell, another multi-point effort. And he also picked up 9 shots for the second time in 3 games, was held without a shot in the second game of the tournament for Sweden against Switzerland a couple of days ago. Came back with a vengeance in this one for a 2-goal game, and that now has him tied for 6th among all players in the World Junior Championship with 5 points, and also helped Sweden remain unbeaten. They're 3-0-0, one of 2 perfect teams with 3 regulation wins in as many games at the World Juniors. That has them in a tie atop the Group A standings. They do technically hold the tiebreaker, but sets them up to have a massive tilt against the United States, who, spoiler alert, is also 3-0-0 on New Year's Eve at 5 p.m. Central Time. And speaking of Team USA, another big-time performance from AJ Spellacy last night to help come back against Slovakia. 2-0 advantage for the Slovaks through 20 minutes, but it was AJ Spellacy who kickstarted the comeback effort with his first goal of the World Juniors early on in the second period, showing off some of that foot speed that he possesses for a player of his size, which is super impressive. Can absolutely fly around out there at 6'3", well over 200 pounds, wins a foot race to get to the Slovakian net first in transition. Real nice pass from Brendan McMorrow. Spellacy taps it home to cut the deficit in half. And then once Slovakia regained their 2-goal lead in the second period, it was Spellacy again making something happen, forcing a turnover in the offensive zone, fires the puck to the crease, and then McMorrow winds up scooping it up and putting it home to cut the Americans' deficit to 3-2. They went on to hold on and defeat Slovakia 6-5 to remain undefeated. And that now gives Spellacy 2 multi-point games in 3 contests so far when centering Team USA's fourth line. I also have loved his physicality, has done some really good stuff on the penalty kill as well, has been a big part of the United States also being 3-0-0 through their opening 3 games. Cannot wait for that tilt against Anton Frondell in Sweden at 5 p.m. CT on New Year's Eve. And then the third Blackhawks prospect who was in action yesterday, Václav Nestrasil, unfortunately, was scoreless for the first time in the World Junior Championship. However, Czechia still found a way to pull off an electric 2-1 overtime win against Finland, one they really needed for momentum throughout the rest of the preliminary round and going into the quarterfinals, which are now set up in a really good spot to make. Adam Jiricek, first-round pick of the St. Louis Blues, teammates with Marek Vanacker and Parker Holmes in the OHL with the Brantford Bulldogs, with a nasty overtime winner to give the Czechs the win. Even though Nestrasil didn't wind up with a point yesterday, though, still has 4 in 3 games, over a point per game, 1 goal and 3 assists. Czechia will return to action also on New Year's Eve, the game prior to the United States versus Canada when they take on Latvia. And with a win against Finland yesterday, they're now 2-1-0. That has them in 3rd place in the Group B standings. Also do want to mention real quick, Team Canada took care of business last night, and Gavin McKenna with an unbelievable hat trick. Obviously, with the Blackhawks, with the way things have been so far in December, with the injuries to Bedard and Nazar, we are back in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes here, and it's been a real strong World Juniors for him thus far. Canada also has 3 wins, but 1 did come in overtime, so technically they only have 8 points, while the United States and Sweden have 9. One more game for all of these teams in the preliminary round of the World Junior Championship before the quarterfinals kick off on January 2nd, 2026. All right, that is going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. My personal on X, can check me out at Jack Bushman 2. My Strictly Blackhawks account, though, is at Talkin' Hockey. Go and give that one a follow so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.